In this talk, we'll be looking at how electronic hive monitoring can affect and improve your current hive inspection practices. We all know that hive inspections are essential to understanding what's going on with our bees, but what do we know about it between inspections? What are you missing? We use Dick Rogers' Healthy Colony Checklist as a foundation to our discussion. That method looks at 6 conditions in the hive, and we really like it because it's very quick and concise and a great way to document your hives. In between inspections, a lot can happen. Let's think about the possibilities with the brood, with the bees, the queen, forage, stressors in space. It turns out that even using simple instrumentation, we can keep tabs on a lot. So we're going to look at some examples of all of these. Starting with brood, it's the future of your hive. The life cycle of bees. Summer bees only last about 6 weeks. Winter bees, more like 4 months. The really tremendous part is that they maintain the brood nest at 95 degrees. And we can see that. They do that with heating and cooling, and it's very closely regulated. But if there's no brood, they don't regulate. So here's an example of a package that was installed in early April. And you can see these major lines here are 1 week, and the minor lines are 1 day. And the daily up and down of the hive temperature is seen here until we get into May, and then it regulates very closely. So we know that the queen has gotten her act together, and the rest of the bees are regulating the temperature. In the second example here, this is running from September until May, and it's easy to see this is the outdoor temperature and the indoor temperature, if you will. In late September, the brood shuts down, and we can see the temperatures tracking the outside temperature. But it's warmer because there still are bees inside and creating some heat mass. We can see that it is warmer inside than outside. So we have confidence that the bees are there. And then in February, they start raising brood. They don't quite have enough population to make it rock solid until here in April. This is a hive in California, and you can see that brood rearing started back here in February, and then in April, it falls apart. So we thought, okay, we lost a queen or something like that. Well, if you look closer, 3 weeks, 21 days before it lost regulation, we see a blip. And that blip was due to a hive inspection. So when they open the hive, the temperature falls a little bit. And we saw evidence of that in here. So we talked to this person, and it turns out that this was actually a split, and he didn't lose the queen. He did a split, but then they did not restart, and so he had to replace the queen later. Here's another example of looking at the bee population. So it's not as rock solid as we'd see normally in a big, strong hive. This was an example of a hive that was attacked by yellow jackets. We'll show you later. But then, through the course of the winter, well, we can see by late October, the inside temperature versus the outside temperature, which is the black line, they become the same. So we know the population has gone essentially to zero. Swarming is easy to see if you've got a temperature and weight scale. Of course, the weight scale will show a big loss in weight of about 6 pounds within an hour. But the other thing that happens is during that, they become very disorganized with their thermal regulation. So we see a temperature blip, and Theo Hartman's going to talk about that in great detail later, because he had quite the experience this spring with some new instrumentation. Queen loss is, like we showed in the earlier example, pretty easy. In this case, the queen was removed to do a brood break. The queen was removed on July 8th, and then we see again 3 weeks later, the thermal regulation goes out because all the brood has emerged. and they can go from there. Here's a typical a nectar flow that we'd all love to see. This is from New Jersey this year. What we do in our honeybee productivity chart is we subtract beekeeper influence. So we know that bees can only add, a couple of pounds an hour. So we subtract out any change that's more than 10 pounds an hour, so that the honeybee productivity shows what the bees are doing and not what everybody else is doing. Here's a full year graph of weight. And so from this is in Virginia, we can see the weight go up during the foraging, during the nectar flow. Then it was harvested. And in this one, we had a second nectar flow, if you will, which was actually robbing. It was a dearth going on at the time. So, that was good information, because we know you're robbing from weak hives. So you watch this one closer for disease coming in. Feeding, so as sugar was added, we see big bumps, and then consuming the sugar water during that. And going into winter, then we see, sort of a constant decline. This little bump was during a snowstorm, then it melted. Into spring, did a little more feeding in order to make it through the deep valley, because feeding increases during the spring when they're bringing on brood and there's no forage, and then coming back into the forage here. The stressors, like I showed, we can see robbing very clearly with the weight scales. Sometimes you also see robbing in the temperature, in the internal temperature. They were getting attacked every afternoon. We knew it was an attack because it was slightly different times, but each afternoon. And we also see that before the robbing, there was a lot of population. And then after the robbing, basically the outside and inside temperatures were identical. So we knew that hive was a goner. So once we have all of this put together, then we can look at a whole year across a hive. And we can see a lot of things in this particular one. Here we see some distress during June, where the temperature is going above the brood zone. And we see some, it fall apart a little bit here in late July. So maybe there was a queen event or something like that. Then in October, we see the brood rearing stop. But here in November, we see that there's no bees left. The temperature is the same as the outside. But what we gathered, and this was verified, was that, as you notice in the weight scale, it's all very smooth, it's up and down and all that. But you see no big drops of taking the hive apart during inspections. And it turned out that this hive was not inspected all year. It was just started up, had a good flow, and then in December it died. So there was no inspections, no mite treatments, no nothing like that. So there's a lot that you see directly and a lot that's inferred from it. Our group, we're a bunch of beekeepers, and trying to do this, trying to move the dial, and we deeply believe that by performing these measurements and openly sharing them through different ways, then we're really going to learn a lot about our bees. And it's not about measuring one hive, it's really about measuring a big variety of hives, where we can see trends and everything across the country and across the globe. Our citizen science project is basically to establish what normal is. By having lots of measurements all over the place, then we establish normal regionally, because it's very different between Arizona and Maine and Seattle and Florida and Australia and New Zealand and all these different places, and Europe for that matter. So we're compiling all this data and then looking for the trends that go through all the hives. And this year we've added the swarming and temperature events, where we're seeing what causes the bees to disorganize on their thermal regulation. And it turns out there's a lot of things that do that. Virgin queens going on their flights and swarming and all these different things. Components that we've been using for these are a temperature sensor, which also, when a temperature event, when a big change happens rapidly, then it records in 1 minute increments. So that's our T2 swarm binder. Temperature humidity device that goes inside the hive. Also, weight scale, which measures half the hive and is a little bit more convenient if you're not a researcher, and a full hive scale that we're introducing this year. And then all of the hubs and cellulars and everything to get this information up to the cloud. Next year, we're working on mite detection, BDAR, working with Herb Almond in Maine as an entrance using radar, which is very cool. But we're also then emerging other tools, put our swarm minder into the TH devices, and also setting up a mesh network because our hives get spread out a lot. So just a quick look at the W2, which we introduced this year. The cool part about it is it can go anywhere in the hive stack. So it works with pallets. It works with if you want to only look at the honey flow or if you want to look at the whole hive. The slatted rack design keeps bees from building burr comb in there, and it's turned out to work very, very well. Everything in the hive is Bluetooth, and it reports either to a hub device, which automatically sends it up to a cell tower, or to your phone, and you can go and harvest it. It gives us great flexibility as far as cost entry point, from being very inexpensive for a temperature-only device to outfitting the whole hive. Beecounted.org is our public domain site where we encourage everybody to share their data and to make that available to everyone around the globe. We've monitored over 2 billion bees. Then as a final look here, I'd like to share just a little bit of video that we've captured with BTV. The nice thing about the slatted rack is that it gives us space to make essentially a TV studio inside the hive. So we're looking at introducing this next year. And here's a little short video showing some stuff. So you can see up here that there's a mite on that bee. This is in infrared, so we're experimenting with different light wavelengths to make it more visible. But early morning, we see the fanning of the bees going on. Not much action. They're just sort of hanging out. This is near the entrance of the hive, so we're seeing that action. Once they start foraging, though, we see them get very animated. It'll be interesting to look at, even looking at the velocity of the bees as they go as an indication. A lot of things that we can look at once we do this. This was as a queen was being introduced. The remarkable part was, they just loved the queen and watching the interaction with that. And then this was just a little bit of grooming that we caught. Thought that was very interesting. So a lot of things to look at. It opens up a whole new area that to explore. And the question is, why do we keep doing this? Well, we have to develop these new techniques and tools. Every part of agriculture has done this. Beekeeping has been very slow to do this, but we feel that there's great benefit in this, and we also feel that Lorenzo would enjoy this too. So thank you for your time.